Welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here for this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a bustling, invisible world that's operating inside every single living thing on Earth. Yep, we're talking about the cell. You've probably heard them called the building blocks of life, but honestly, they aren't just static bricks. They are incredibly complex, highly active, microscopic cities.
But before we actually step inside that city, let me ask you something that might sound a little silly. Why don't cells just collapse like a blob of jelly? I mean, if you've ever held a water balloon, you know it's super fragile. Without structure, it just squishes. So how does life, right at its most fundamental microscopic level, keep its shape without falling apart? Well, today we're going to figure out exactly what gives life its structure and how it organizes itself to keep you, me, and everything around us alive.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. First, we'll explore the fluid mosaic model, then the rigid cell wall. After that, we'll step onto the bustling factory floor, and finally, we'll compare simple versus complex cells. All right, let's jump into our first section, the boundary, also known as the fluid mosaic model. So when scientists talk about the cell membrane, they use this term, the fluid mosaic model. Let's break that down a bit. See, the membrane isn't some rigid brick wall. It's actually a flexible, almost sandwich-like boundary. The fluid part just means it can move. It's totally flexible, and the pieces inside can actually shift around. And the mosaic part? That refers to a pattern of different components joined together. In this case, those pieces are mostly lipids, which are fats, and proteins. Think of it kind of like a sandwich, where the lipids are the bread and the proteins are the filling. A really great way to visualize this in practice is to imagine a vast, fluid sea of lipids. And floating right there in that sea are boats. These are your proteins. Because the sea is fluid, those boats can bob, weave, and drift around. It's a super dynamic environment. And those protein boats? They're absolutely crucial because they act like transporters moving vital stuff in and out of the cell. It's basically a beautifully designed, living security gate. Moving right along to Section 2, the reinforcement, focusing on the rigid cell wall. Think about this for a second. When you sit in the tub for way too long, your fingers get all wrinkly and shrunken, right? But when it rains outside for days, the leaves on a tree don't get wrinkly at all. They stay perfectly firm. Why's that? Well, animal cells, like ours, lose water and shrink, but plants have a totally different challenge. They don't have a skeleton to hold them up. To stand tall against the wind, the rain, and just gravity itself, they need a different kind of reinforcement so they don't just collapse. If we put these boundaries side by side, it makes total sense. The cell membrane is thin, flexible, and living. It's made of those lipids and proteins we just talked about, and it's in both plants and animals. But the cell wall, that's an extra outer layer found only in plants, fungi, and bacteria. It's thick, it's non-living, and it is completely rigid because it's made of a tough carbohydrate called cellulose. So when a plant takes in a ton of excess water, that rigid cell wall acts like a strongbox. It physically stops the cell from bursting and keeps the whole plant standing tall. All right, let's push past the boundary and head into Section 3, the interior, or what we're calling the bustling factory floor. For the longest time, people kind of assumed that once you get past the cell membrane, the inside is just empty space, just a hollow water balloon filled with fluid. But is it really just empty space in there? The short answer is absolutely not. When scientists finally got a good look inside with advanced microscopes, what they found was honestly mind-blowing. Instead of empty space, they found this incredibly busy, jelly-like living material. Meet the cytoplasm. This is the vital fluid where the real magic happens. It fills up all that space between the membrane and the center of the cell. And it isn't just passive goo, it's a highly active, living substance that literally holds the whole operation together. What's so fascinating here is how the source material frames the cytoplasm. It's not just biological packing peanuts, it's a dynamic factory floor. Think about a real factory. You need physical space for machines to run, workers to move, and products to be stored, right? The cytoplasm does exactly that. It houses all the tiny biological machines which we call organelles. It's the main site for vital chemical reactions, it stores essential substances, and it gives materials the space to move around and get to where they need to go. That brings us to our final section, number 4, the architecture, looking at simple versus complex cells. To really get your head around the two main ways cells are organized, I want you to picture two totally different living situations. On the one hand, imagine a super messy, single-room apartment. You're trying to sleep, cook dinner, watch TV, and study all in the exact same cramped space. Pure chaos, right? Now, on the other hand, imagine a beautifully organized multi-room mansion. You have a dedicated kitchen for cooking, a quiet bedroom for sleeping, maybe a home office. Everything has its specific place. Well, cells operate in these exact same two ways. The messy, single-room apartment of the biological world is called a prokaryotic cell. Let's look at that word. Pro means before, and karyon means nucleus. So these are primitive, small, simple cells without a true, well-defined nucleus. Their genetic materials just sort of freely floating around in the cytoplasm because they don't have separate membrane-bound rooms. A classic example? Simple bacteria. Everything is just happening all at once in one shared space. Contrast that with eukaryotic cells. U means true. These are the multi-room mansions. They are incredibly complex and feature a true, well-defined nucleus that's protected by its own membrane. But even more than that, they contain specialized, membrane-bound organelles. Just like that mansion has separate rooms for cooking and sleeping, a eukaryotic cell has dedicated compartments for making energy, storing waste, and building proteins.
When we look at this comparison side by side, the difference is huge. Bacteria are prokaryotes. They lack that defined nucleus and those specialized rooms. But plant and animal cells, they're both eukaryotes. And this distinction is an absolute game changer. Huge organisms like you, me, the dog, the trees outside, we need millions of cells working together without everything breaking down. We absolutely rely on this compartmentalized eukaryotic architecture to pull off complex bodily functions, and quite frankly, prevent total biological chaos.
Now, let's quickly loop back to that question we asked at the very beginning. Why don't cells collapse like a water balloon? Well, for animal cells that don't have that rigid outer wall, there's a hidden secret inside. Eukaryotic cells actually possess a cytoskeleton. It's a microscopic network of tiny fibers that acts just like the steel framework of a skyscraper, or even the skeleton inside your own body. It holds the cell's shape, gives it support, and even acts like a little railway system to transport materials across the cell. How cool is that? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to highlight a really brilliant quote from the source material. All organelles work together like departments in a factory to keep cells alive. I feel like that just perfectly captures everything we've talked about. Whether it's the security gate of the fluid mosaic membrane, the reinforced walls of a plant cell, or the specialized rooms in our eukaryotic mansions, every single microscopic piece is collaborating flawlessly to create the large-scale phenomena we call life. It is literally mind-blowing when you take a step back and think about the sheer scale of it all. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. If you are made up of trillions of these highly organized, non-stop microscopic factories, what incredible things are they building, repairing, and creating inside you right at this very moment? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep wondering, and I'll catch you next time.